Let me welcome you to the regular town council meeting of the town of Sunnyvale for November 12th, 2018. This is the first and only meeting in month of November. We appreciate you being here and participating in this process. I would invite Council Member Allen to lead the invocation.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for this night, this opportunity to be here to represent our town, our community, our citizens. Father, we thank you for the blessings you've given to us this town. We ask that you'll give us the wisdom and courage and insight to make decisions we need to for the betterment of our town. Father, we thank you for the veterans that have served our country, those young men and women that are stationed so far away from home and in harm's way. Father, we pray that you will protect them and bring them home safely. Father, we pray for our country as well, that you will provide wisdom and leadership. Father, we thank you for this night, the opportunities we have to serve. These things we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in standing as we pledge allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Now time is 7:04. Let me call to order the regular town council meeting of the town of Sunnyvale for November 12th. For the record, Council Member McNeil, Allen, Finch, Egan, and George are present. Mr. Wade and Mr. Clark will not be joining us today. Council, we have an item for the recognition of one of our former council members, and that item is cancelled. He will not be here, so we will be sending the recognition to his residence. The second item is public forum. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time you can come forward and speak to the council on any items you would like other than matters for litigation or personal matters. So if you would like to come and talk to the council, please come forward at this time. No one is coming forward, so I'm going to close the public forum at this time. Council, we have 3 items on the consent agenda. Item number 1, preliminary financial report ending September 30th, 2018. Item 2, discuss and consider resolution 80-22 of the town council of the town of Sunnyvale, Texas, approving a contract between the town and Lineberger, Goggins, Blair, and Sampson LLP for municipal court collections and authorizing a collection fee in the amount of 30% of debts and accounts receivable such as unpaid fines, fees, court costs, forfeited bond, and restitution order paid by a municipal court serving the town, and amounts in cases in which the accused has failed to appear. Item number 3, discuss and consider a resolution of the town council of the town of Sunnyvale, Texas, to continue contract services with the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, UT Southwestern, to provide continuing education services, including services for education instructor to perform continuing education CE, evaluation and record keeping of EMS personnel by requirements of the Texas Department of State Health Services, DSHS. Council, would anyone like to remove any of the items from the consent agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 3 as presented? Motion made by Mr. Finch to approve consent agenda items 1 through 3. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I'll second.
Second by Allen to approve consent agenda items 1 through 3 as presented. Everyone heard the motion? All in favor signify. All opposed. Motion passed 5-0. Mr. Wade and Mr. Clark are absent. Moving on to agenda item number 4, that is to discuss, hold public hearing, and consider and act upon a request by Michael Gola, R&M Motley LLC, to approve a specific use designation and site plan for a contractor shop use at or about 350 to 370 US Highway 80, US Highway 80. Sir Rashad?
Mayor,
Good
Council.
morning, good evening, Rashad.
Evening. The applicant, as you noted, has requested a specific use designation for a contractor shop use for the location located at 315, 317 US Highway 80. This is the old spa warehouse location. City property is zoned highway commercial, and specific use designation uses are uses that require approval by P&Z and council, which are considered generally compatible with the surrounding area but require specific approval in order to move forward. The applicant has noted that the site will house very few employees throughout the day and will seldom, if ever, be open to the public. It is a contractor shop. Majority of the storage will be inside as required by this specific use designation. The other structure to be utilized by the tenant will be the shed barn adjacent to the warehouse. The main structure is the metal structure, the old metal barn structure that will be the main area for the business. So the property lies to the west of Power Line easement and to the north of Highway 80 frontage road. The existing warehouse building, as I noted, is 7,200 square feet. The exterior will not be altered except for the addition of a 4-foot masonry wainscot along the front of the building. The metal exterior will be painted. The applicant has requested alternative compliance from the masonry requirement, stating that there's some issues with regard to the structural validity of the front facade in order to put the brick on it. The applicant is here to address any questions in regards to that. The building is a non-conforming structure. Due to the absence of a use for more than a year, the property is subject to the town's current development requirements. The applicant has dealt with this structure and trying to get somebody in it for the last year. The previous tenant kind of backed out at the last minute. So, but with that being said, this is the process, even if it's legally not performing, that he has to go forth with. We're just requesting variations from our current requirements. Since it was legally not conforming, and now that that has expired, he is required to bring the building up to code. But due to the nature of the structure, there are some variations that staff is feeling are comfortable with, we're comfortable with, because the structure has laid dormant for so long. There's other details with regard to the request that, as I noted, the applicants requested alternative compliance from the landscaping in the front, highway commercial, highway 80 frontage requires like a 50-foot landscape buffer. As you know, the majority of this is concrete. He is going to saw cut a portion of the concrete in order to put a landscaping in the front there. Part of the Planning and Zoning Commission approval, there was some concerns from the abutting neighbors to the north, Metal Lake, with regard to screening. The applicant has agreed to put some screening directly behind the structure, not necessarily behind the homes, but directly behind the structure itself. And I can right in this area here, he'll put some landscaping, some trees in this area here. There is approximately about 400 feet between the actual building that will be used, which is this, and the neighboring subdivision. This will not be used as part of the lease agreement for the contractor shop, so it will remain as owned by the Motley family. I guess if there are any other questions, staff is here to address them, and staff recommends approval as submitted.
Council, question for Mr. Jackson.
Rashad, I'm sure the applicant can answer this, but this is no outside storage.
No outside storage.
And the trucks that they have or the vehicles, the employees that come there will be parking, I assume, in the designated parking area.
Yes.
And the trucks at night will also be in those designated parking areas?
That is my understanding. I think some of these trucks will be able to fit within the warehouse structure itself.
Okay, so they would be hidden from view?
Yes.
But at least it'll be an orderly looking environment at any time during the day, whether
That is
it's
the
while
intent.
the business is open or when it's closed.
Yes, that's the intent.
Additional questions for staff?
Rashad, I have a couple for you. In P&Z, they recommended, and I believe they approved, 6 large or 6 trees for shade.
Yes.
As I read through this, it appeared that that's not going to be done. Is that correct, or it is going to be done?
That is going to be done since that was added at the end of the committee meeting. That is their recommendation, and the applicant stated that they would be willing to do that. That's what I just noted at the back of the
So
project.
I just want to be sure. Do we know what kind of trees those are going to be? If they ask for 6 shade trees, we're not going to plant small trees, are we?
That's something that we can ask the applicant, but we haven't got to the specifics on that.
Okay. The second one is with regards to the paint of the facility. I don't think it's a secret that the facility is kind of in bad shape appearance-wise. So do we know what kind of paint is going to be used or required to be used to actually cover that, and will they be able to address that?
The applicant probably addressed that better than I can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Rashad, I'm assuming that we'll do an inspection prior to certificate of occupancy on that little shed there. I don't know what kind of condition it's in as far as electrical, plumbing, whatever's in that.
Definitely. Everything will have to meet building and fire code. That's one thing that kind of slowed the progress with regard to the place being occupied in the past. That the applicant is more than willing to meet the building codes and the standards that we have in the UDO and building codes as far as 2009 building code right now.
And I'm also curious about the entrance because I noticed the other businesses down Highway 80 have a new concrete drive that's been put in with a culvert for drainage and such as that. How does our UDO, do we address that, or is that?
I believe there's existing concrete now. It's not in great shape, so it's not necessarily something that will need to be updated. But the applicant, those businesses did that on their own.
Okay.
So that's something that we may want to request, but it's not necessarily part of the application.
I look at it now, it's gravel on
It is,
it. At least according to Google Earth, it's gravel. I was just curious what the UDO addresses on that. Thank you.
Additional questions for staff? Witness here? Good evening. Will you state your name and address for the record? And also, there's an yellow slip out there in front of you. If you could fill that up on your way out and drop it off on the door, that'd be great.
All right, thank you. Yes, Robert Crouch, 17100, FM 2728, Terrell, Texas.
Robert,
And this is the tenant, so I'll go ahead and introduce him also.
How you doing? Aaron Forsland. Address here, the 4447 North Central Expressway, Dallas, Texas, 752.
And welcome, Mr. Deere.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, there's a couple of things. First off, we're going to use the same brick that we used on the other buildings, so it'll have some kind of uniformity. Rather than do a stone, we're going to use a brick. We're also going to find a natural color on the front. We'll put two new doors in. We've already repainted the little building on the right. The trees will come at the end, if that's okay. We've got a lot of saw cutting to do, a lot of trucks moving around. We're waiting on the power company to move a power line. So as soon as that happens, we'll get in there. As far as the trucks at night, they're all inside. During the day, they'll park in designated parking spaces. We will identify the fire lane and make sure it's clear to meet fire code. Fire hydrant's close enough that they can come in. We have a hammerhead, a truck can come in, back out, take off. As to the driveway, we replaced both driveways already. TxDOT has sent out letters stating that changes are coming. We don't believe it'll affect us, but at this time we'd like to just hang on if we could and let our tenant get in. And if they say we're not going to tear your driveway out, we'll put a new one in. We'll put a new fence in once we get them in to dress it up. I know that the spa warehouse has had a real rough history. The family has done a lot to clean it up. We really have. And we welcome Energy Guard to the town of Sunnyvale. They do not work on site. They foam buildings, houses, etc. at that location.
They work from that location?
Yes, sir. They meet in the morning, they leave and come back.
Go to the location to do
Yes,
the
sir.
work?
That's
The work
correct.
is not
Yes, sir.
done at the site on inside?
That's correct. Yes,
So
sir.
what is the warehouse is storing stuff? What is that?
Yes, sir. It'll be used at night. It'll be used to store our spray foam rigs, 'cause we don't like to keep them outside.
Okay.
And then it will also store all of the chemicals that we use. They come in sealed 55-gallon drums. We load them into the truck in the morning, open them at the job site. The guys spray foam all day, come back, park the trucks. So really for the main warehouse, the warehouse portion will just be for storage. We don't manufacture anything. We don't fabricate anything. The little small building off to the east, that will be where my sales guys, my operations manager, and myself will office out of. And then that's about it. So,
The larger building, once you walk inside that door, which will replace a smaller door and get rid of that ugly awning, when you walk in there, there's a little office in there. We've already demoed it out just because it was rat infested. We've cleaned all that up. We'll replace that. We'll also put in a handicap bathroom, so we'll meet code. We're upgrading every bit of the electrical inside that building and the little building to make sure we're at code. And then on the left is a trash compactor, which will be completely enclosed with a cinder brick block wall. So there shouldn't be anything visible from the outside. There was a question previously about people in that field. If anybody's in that field, call the police, throw them in jail. We'll support them 100%. No one should be there. So if anybody's out there, it will not be us. So call sheriffs, tell them to come get them.
Council, question for the applicant. Yes, sir?
When it comes to the screening, putting the trees in, I appreciate the fact that the trees you've offered to put the trees in. But are we setting ourselves up for whatever future possibility might be with where the location of the trees are going to be right behind the building, as opposed to getting the trees further back in the lot, so we don't start creating maybe a 15 or 20, or hopefully if you're young enough, you might be here 45 years from now. But at some point in time in the future, there's a possibility that property could be utilized even with a different building and a different structure that is going to meet our requirements. And as such, by putting the trees right behind the building, we may be restricting the potential uses. Would there be any consideration to putting those further out back?
We'll put them anywhere. This came up at P&Z, and we just offered to put them on that tree line. And the only reason we really did that on the spur of the moment is we thought we could run us a drip line to them. But it doesn't matter to us. Whatever the city would like us to do, we'll do it.
And I'll leave it on that question
Okay.
because we can't answer that here.
Yeah, we'll do it
I'll leave it
however
to
you want
staff to work through that just as a thought or an idea. It may not be practical, but I'll let staff make that decision at that point in time.
I think what we could do, I actually kind of like your idea, I appreciate it very much, because, at some point in time, they may want to enter, there's a back door on this building, so they may want to use a forklift or something.
Sure.
Of course, right now, you cannot drive on, there's no way to do it, but at some point, we may come back to the city and ask. So what I may do is go back to the Motley family. We'll go outside that fence line, and we'll probably go 20 feet, and that way we can move that fence back. If the town agrees to it, that's what we'll do, and then we'll just run our drip line back there. We just didn't want to get in a situation where we got dead trees, so.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, we all realize that's going to happen. Just a second question, I'll leave that to staff to work out. But second question, is that on septic or is it on sanitary sewer?
We added a sewer line about 6 years ago. Every property that the Motley family owned is on sewer.
Just wanted to be sure that, getting back to the trees again,
Right.
that may be where the drain field was. So
Yeah,
that
no,
would
appreciate it.
end up being
No,
a
sir,
problem.
we added sewer, I wish I could remember, getting old and senile, probably 5 or 6 years ago.
You're not that much older than I am.
Yeah, I feel it sometimes. I feel it sometimes. So,
Mr. Ali, have a question?
Robert had one question for you.
Yes,
Good
sir.
to see you again too, by the way.
good to see you, Larry.
Yeah.
Been a long time.
Some of the residents were concerned about the paint or the rust on the building now and how y'all are going to cover that. So it's kind of a question I guess I would pose. How are you going to paint that to ensure the rust doesn't come back through it?
On the front, we're trying to use a natural color, just so it doesn't stand out. On the sides, we'll probably paint it back to the galvanized. The roof will be coated. We really want to dress it up. We want it to be a nice property. We just got to figure out what looks good, what doesn't. So we'll probably put galvanized on the side just to prevent the rust. And then on the front, we'll have it looking a lot nicer, like a natural color.
Okay, one last question, probably for, is it Aaron, is that right?
Yes, sir.
What is the hours of operation? I know you said morning to evening, but what does that look like, 5 to?
Our guys usually get there, so my operations manager, he gets there 6:15, 6:30. All of our guys get there about 6:30. They leave, they come back. It varies, but usually I don't like our guys being out late at night driving the trucks around. So they're usually back by about 6:37, and then they'll put the trucks inside and then they'll leave as well.
And so these are all your trucks, are they subcontracted out, or are they all your trucks?
It's all our employees, it's all our own vehicles.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure that the hours of operation don't preclude a potential commercial job that you might have to have guys doing a night job on occasion.
That,
Not that I've got a problem with it, I mean, come on, it's a highway. But I want to be sure that it's out in the open, that it's not just, probably 99% of the time you're going to be running Monday through Friday from somebody being there at 6 until somebody might be there till 7. But there might be the occasion where you got to do something that's on the commercial side.
yeah, of course.
You might come back in at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
But you're 400 feet away from the nearest house, you shouldn't be really. And it's not like you're banging steel around or anything like that. You want to put the truck inside.
Yeah, I mean, and we, to the extent that it's possible, I always have my operations manager at the shop when the guys are coming back. If they get stuck on a job late, I don't expect him to stay.
Yeah.
But for the most part, he's there when they get back, so he can kind of keep his eyes on everything. So, and we're gonna put cameras up and all that stuff too. So we'll have eyes on the place.
Most of the time, this foam product comes in a part A and a part B, and you're probably
Correct.
receiving it in 55-gallon drums,
Correct.
which means you've probably got 18-wheelers coming in
Correct.
for your deliveries.
Yes, sir.
Not for your takeaways, but just for your deliveries.
Just deliveries only.
Is there adequate room on the way that drive is set up that you can get a box truck, or it's probably not going to be a package type bobtail, it's probably going to be
No, it'll be a semi.
semi. Will they be able to get, are they going to have any issues negotiating in and out of there?
I don't think so. They can get in and out of our warehouse now, and it's a lot. We're a lot more restricted on room than we are here.
When we change out the entrance, we're gonna make that gate bigger. And once TxDOT tell us what they're doing, we'll match the driveways down the road. And they have 18-wheelers going in and out of there also. So
Yep.
we'll do whatever it takes to get them in and out without any problems, because that's a dangerous road right there.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. Please take a seat. We may be calling you back for additional questions. This is a public hearing portion of the agenda. If anyone would like to come forward and discuss this topic, please come forward at this time.
Henry Powell, 109 Sunbird.
Good evening, Henry.
Not a comment on this particular request, but on requests similar to it. Notice that we have a number of businesses that are coming to us that have been unable to release their properties within the minimum year timeframe. Our UDO is subjected them to all the upgrading to all the current regulations, which is very difficult in many cases. So I would just suggest that we consider perhaps amending the UDO to provide a little bit greater leeway. It's very difficult, especially if we get into an economic downturn, to lease some of these commercial properties. And if we want to build more businesses in town and increase our commercial revenue, we need to take that into consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Additional input from the citizens. No one is coming forward, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Council, additional questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, if not, can I have a motion with respect to the request by Michael Gola, R&M Motley LLC, to approve a specific use designation and site plan for a contractor shop used at or about 315 to 317 US Highway 80.
May I make a motion to approve along with the P and Z recommendations, and I think that's all we have left, is P and Z working with staff.
Motion made by Mr. Second by Mr. Finch to approve the application by Michael Gola to approve a specific use designation at site plan for a contractor shop use at about 315 and 317 US Highway 80, subject to satisfied the completion of P&Z and staff recommendations. Everyone heard the motion? All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Welcome, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Ray. Moving on to the discussion action items portion of the Director of Development Services. Number 5, discuss and consider and act upon a request by Rigoberto Hernandez to approve a minor plat for the Hernandez addition at or about 479 Poly Road. Sure.
Mayor, Council, applicant is owner of unapproved residential property located at 479 Pollard Road. Tract of land is approximately 0.98 acres. He's requesting approval of a minor plat in order to build on the property. The property resides in the SM2 zoning district. It meets most all requirements except, of course, the 0.02 acres. Staff feels as though that this is acceptable due to the fact that the easement was the reasoning for the fact that it can't meet that requirement. My town engineer has looked at this as well as the town planner, and both feel as though this is acceptable. It meets the requirement. The setbacks will still remain as required. Front setback is 70 feet, sides 30 feet, and 80 feet. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval as submitted, and the applicant also furnished a deed showing that that portion that we're talking about was required by Texas Utilities Electric Company.
Council, question for Mr. Rochelle. Mr. Jackson. So this is not a public hearing, correct, Rachel?
It's not.
Okay. If not, okay. If there are no additional discussions on this, can I have a motion with respect to request by Rigoberto Hernandez to approve a minor plat for the Hernandez addition at about 479 Poly Road?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Allen to approve the application for a minor plat.
Second.
Second by Mr. McNeil to approve the application. Request made by Rigoberto Hernandez to approve a minor plat for the Hernandez addition at about 479 Poly Road. Everyone heard the motion? All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 5-0. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Moving on to item number 6, discuss and consider and act upon a request by Michael Twitchell to approve an alternate compliance residential exterior exception for the Twitchell addition at about 374 Barnes Bridge Road. Mr. Jackson.
Mayor, Council, as you know, the applicant has requested a request for exterior material exception for residential property located at 374 Barnes Bridge Road. The design of the home is a proposed modern home. The UDO allows for exceptions to be requested by town council with regard to alternative exterior building material or percentage of exterior masonry building materials if it is a specific architectural design. Our standard requirements are 90% masonry, and 40% of that can be stucco. The applicant has proposed, as I noted, masonry building that, as we go through the applicant will present, is here and will present the reasoning behind the request and the design. It's a stone, combination of stone, wood, concrete, and of course, storefront glass facade. Staff feels as though that the request still meets the intent of the design standards, except for the materials, of course. That will be left up to town council to approval. But overall, the request can be approved if it is found that the proposal, it meets the intent of the standards for the, unified development ordinance.
Council, question from Mr. Jackson. If not, you said the applicant is here?
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
Welcome.
My name is Chris Boning. I work for Mike Twitchell Architects in Dallas. Obviously, this is his personal property, his personal house, so he's put a great deal of time and thought into it. He's worked with Mr. Jackson previously on compliance with the zoning ordinance, and you can tell from the images that it's not a typical home in the area. The intent has been since the beginning since it is sort of a rural area detached from other residential developments, to be more of a unique, obviously, showpiece home. Actually, with the primary owner, which is coincidentally his daughter. He is out of the country right now with his other daughter, so we're here requesting the compliance exception as noted by Mr. Jackson. I think the grounds for approval would be, as Mr. Jackson pointed out, it's based on the style of architecture that's been presented. It's not one that lends itself to great masses of masonry. It does have, as you can see, pilasters and plinths and some monoliths that are primarily of the same stone as you're building here. As you go around the building, it faces the lake. So the backside of this is predominantly large expanses of glass, which is in a very contemporary, very modern style with regard to material and massing. As you look at the other sides of it, and there's a few illustrations.
So let me ask you, is this the way his house is going to look like, or this is just an example?
No, this is the house that is being presented. It will look like this, yes. There's some probably two-dimensional elevations. Oh, I'm sorry. Tools here. So I think there's three images here, and Mr. Jackson, I guess the Google animations were really to illustrate just some of the constructability or okay. So what you're looking at here is the left-hand side of the front of the house with a circular sort of drop-off drive. That sort of dark wall in front of you is the backside of what will be the featured kitchen, which is part and parcel to this whole development. It's intended to serve not only as their primary residence, but being in the business that they're in, they entertain and they work with lots of local chefs in their catering business. So it will be something that is going to be a feature of the whole development, the whole house, really. The backside of it, as you can see, where that gentleman is standing in the rendering, is the living room, which is attached to the kitchen, and then it progresses more towards private space as you move to the left there. A zero-edge pool in front and lots of landscaping, a lot of which is already there. It's modern in its design in the sense that the massing and the materials both work together to create these little spaces and pockets and stuff like that. So there's a lot of cantilevers, a lot of overhangs, and the intended roof garden and stuff like that are all part of what we would contend to be contemporary architecture. Now, these were some preliminary studies that we did early on as to how this would frame together and actually function. This is part of our own animation. I don't know if it will actually play, but just one. There it goes. Oops, jumped ahead. There it goes. So what you're seeing here gives you a better understanding of how the pieces of the structure go together. Everything that's in red is structural steel. The rest of it at one point was designed to be steel studs with TJI roof framing. The important part to note is just the way the masses come together, and you see the two-story high feature stair that separates the ground level public space from some upper bedrooms. This on the end that's closest to us now is the master suite, and again, all of these look out over the lake that's there now. So there is a great design intent to have as much glass on that side of the house as possible. This was preliminary, so I think the intent now is to use wood studs, but all of the steel will be there as indicated. This isn't just another look at how the frame might work. And you can see sort of in the floor plan how the furniture kind of lays out as it goes around.
How big is this building?
If I remember right, it was 2,400 square feet and change.
I think it's 34.
34, okay, it's going back and forth.
Mhm.
We've worked on this for a little while. So as you can see, there's a lot of tectonics and massing as the pieces come together to form unique spaces. Oops, I guess that was the last one.
Council, question for the applicant.
Thank you
Of course.
for coming. Question about looks like wood is going to be your primary in percentages. 21, I think it was 21%
Yes.
of your usage. So tell me about, I mean, obviously the standards are there to make sure we have a good structure, lasts a long time.
Correct.
Obviously,
Yes.
but talk to me about the wood you want to use. I assume it's not going to be pine.
No, it would be pine. We've looked at different species. I'm not exactly sure which one Mike has proposed as the final wood. Douglas fir and some oak trim have been discussed. So it'll be something that'll be stained well and maintained well. He's looked at cement fiberboard, but that doesn't have quite the quality and feel that a contemporary, showpiece home would have. So it would be of the same quality as you can see, the exposed steel trim around the windows, the double insulated glass, the limestone. I mean, it will be a high quality, very high quality home. And as you can see from the engineering drawings, it is well designed, and it's obviously being the business he's in, and he has been since 1980. I've been in his office since 1997. This is his personal property for his family, so it's not anything he's going to skimp on.
You don't see steel studs much in
No. No, you'd be surprised at the foundation drawings as well. They're extensive.
Robust.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Looks beautiful, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Council, additional questions for the applicant? Thank you. You pick up that one of the yellow sheets and,
Mayor?
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
I do have one question.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Looking at the lighting on the backside of that, I was trying to look at Google Maps as to see if there's any houses on the backside of this, the pond. I can't see any.
There's one back there, but it's pretty far back there, and there's a whole tree line back there as well. So even from this view where all the glass is, you can't actually see anything about the home. You can see kind of a structure that's out there that looks like an old shed, but it is their property line. You can see it across the lake, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for hearing us.
Council, additional questions for Rashad or the applicant?
I'll just note that in the original plans that were submitted to staff, the applicant has shown a crushed granite driveway,
Okay.
which isn't allowed per our standard. We do allow alternative material after 50 feet. So it would have to be concrete up to the 50-foot setback line.
And that's been communicated?
Yes, well, I believe our building official explained that's the reason why we're here. They wanted to do something a little different, but that was something I noted in the plans as I was reviewing it. So if they're willing to do that, they can move forward, but if not, they would have to get a variance from the Board of Adjustment to get something different.
Can I ask you to come back one more time?
Sure.
Did you hear the comment made by
Yes, I don't think, speak out of turn, I don't think they would entertain the going through the variance process for a partial driveway. So you're talking about having concrete up to 50 feet from the house?
Yes, I
And then
gave
if
you
you want to,
specific.
okay, he has comments. Are you giving comments on that?
Yes, the building official, as you go through, will tell you
Any
specific
problem?
setback line.
Concrete drive up to within 50 feet of the house and then crushed
First
granite, circular
50
drive?
feet, first 50 feet off the street.
Off the
Okay,
street.
yeah, once I said first 50 feet up to
Yeah.
that,
Not to the house.
first 50 feet up to the house and then a crushed granite circular drive.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're good with
we're
it?
saying the same thing. Yes, we're fine with that.
Okay.
Yes.
You're good, Rashad? Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, additional questions and discussions on this topic?
Mr. Mayor, I have
Yes, sir.
one topic, and, Mr. Fitch brought it up. I don't see that to be an issue in this design. I think it's quality of steel. It's going to be a very nice, expensive product. I'm not in favor of having wood siding in our town. However, if this is going to be the quality of fir or cedar, I think that's reasonable to assume that that's a quality product. So I think the reference to either or, I would, and again, I don't think they're going to go backwards, but I'd just like to be sure that we stipulate, because we're going to have other residents ask the same thing at some point, that we're talking about allowing something that's a quality wood such as the Douglas fir or the cedar. So I don't know how we stipulate that, because they don't know exactly what they're going to build yet, but I think it's just kind of a point of order, at least in my mind, for wood.
So you want to stipulate something in the motions, what you're saying?
Well,
Sure.
he's already stated that they're talking about Douglas fir.
I mean, I'm not a wood expert, but I would say, you know, a higher end wood material. Not everyone has their own opinion of what's higher end. Yeah, so I couldn't necessarily specifically, I would have to get with my building official, see what he thoughts, what concerns he would have with long-term maintenance with regards to wood exteriors.
Any thought, Mr. Allen, how do you want to state that? I mean, you said that.
Yeah, I would take almost the words he said, that, in the lines of fir, Douglas fir. Is that what you said, Douglas fir?
Yeah, and I hate to be that restricted.
So would you come back to worry that the people can hear you?
Ash, or maybe,
Can you come up to the microphone?
So you can come to the mic. Because we got streaming, I want to be able to see, people should be able to
Yeah,
hear.
the breadth and choices you have in wood siding or wood shiplap are almost infinite. I might propose that could, if you need to clarify or quantify that some way, could it be stipulated as approved at a future date once a species is chosen? Or do you need to know now?
Council feels comfortable with that?
Typically, a high-end wood would be an ash or, they run the gamut all the way up to Brazilian ippy wood, which is incredibly expensive.
Should we say as approved by the building official?
I would say if our building official has concerns, then we'll definitely bring it back and make y'all aware. But if not, I think we can move forward with knowing that it'll be a high-end
Yeah,
material.
regardless of which species is chosen, it will be a high-end rain screen type system, which will have integral drainage behind it, will be maintained and breathable on a vapor barrier, so it will not present any long-term degrading effects. It will be of high quality. I would only ask for a little bit of latitude in choosing a species, so that Mike can comment on that when he gets back.
Would you have a problem with us just making it as approved by the building official?
I think that's fair, yeah.
Rashad, does that work for you, or would you rather have a little more? You're good with that?
Now, would that be at the permit review time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I don't want to get down to deep in the woods, because I know this is not going to be a low-end wood.
No.
But I want to stipulate that it's a high-end wood, and
Yeah.
the building inspector can do that. And again, because somebody else is going to come back and say, hey, you approved wood here, I want to do pine here. And, that's not where, I am personally in our town approving more wood, but this is high-end, so I want us to be sure that we stipulate high-end wood
Yeah.
as approved by the building inspector. I'm okay with that.
I think Mike may just have some specific,
Cedar,
It needs a little bit of latitude on it.
Brazilian, is that what you said? Throw what that
I'm not
is,
suggesting that, only because that's really below the budget. but-
Yeah. No, I'm not trying to belittle the point. I
No,
just
no,
want to
not
make
at
sure
all.
that the other people
No.
come back to the council next
Absolutely.
month
Yes.
They said, well, you prove this,
Yeah.
but you can stipulate.
Yeah, I think that protects you, and it also gives Mike a little bit of latitude in what he
Yeah,
does.
absolutely.
Okay.
Additional questions for the applicant before he goes back?
Huh?
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no additional discussions, so I'm going to let Larry make the motion.
I recommend that we approve this motion with the stipulation of a high-end wood left to be determined by the building inspector.
Motion made by Mr. Allen. There a second?
Second.
Second by Finch to approve the request by Michael Twitchell to approve an alternate compliance residential exterior extension for the Twitchell addition at about 374 Barnes Bridge Drive, Barnes Bridge Road, stipulated that they use a high-end wood to be approved by the building official at a later time. Everyone heard the motion?
Mayor, I want to be sure we're making something clear here.
Yes, sir.
Larry indicated the building inspector. You just said the building official.
Okay.
We need to qualify which that motion is. I feel it needs to be building official as opposed to the inspector. Larry, if you'd say so moved, then okay.
So we make it official.
Building official, okay.
Make the
Good.
official.
Yes, yes. We made the official position, got it. Additional discussions? If not, all in favor of the motion signify. All opposed, motion passed 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, Council addition number 7, discuss and review United States Postal centralized mail delivery for residential development Sunnyvale. I specifically requested this item be added to the council because there are many on and off emails, questions from various citizens and council members on why at some places in town, especially the new developments, we have the centralized mail delivery system as opposed to the individual house load system. So I'm going to turn this over to, it's going to be Leslie who's going to show. It's going to be Mr. Jackson. I just want Jackson to go through the history behind it, what can we do, what we cannot do, and I want, there's no action on it. I want council to ask any number of questions that we at least, I know you guys get a lot of questions from the HOAs as well as the residents. So with that, Jackson, I'm going to turn this over to you, sir.
Mayor, Council, as you noted, it's a requested item to be presented here tonight. To give background, on January 17, 2018, town staff was notified by the United States Postal Service that all new residential development within the Sunnyvale will require centralized mail delivery. The USPS growth coordinator, Michael Newton, noted that any development with more than 6 lots proposed or remaining would be required to use centralized mail delivery. Now, of course, when I first heard this, we have like 6 phases currently being developed, and I explained that there was going to be some issue with regard to transition. I made all developers aware of the transition and how they could request a variance from the requirement. The United States Postal Service allows for a variance to be requested, but that has to come from the developer themselves. The town staff can make the request to the developer saying, and we would really prefer individual, but the final approval is agreed upon between the Postal Service and the developer with regard to the mode and delivery. So as we move forward through this, there was an issue with regard to the homestead subdivision here in Sunnyvale. Phase 6, I explained to Mr. Newt, this is giving a more detail in regards to this transition, that we already had homes that already had individual mail delivery. He explained that this would still need to require a transition to centralized mail delivery. I reached out to the developer, Christopher Jackson, and it came to a point where they stopped delivering mail to the subdivision for the phase. Mr. Newt, I'm not speaking ill of him, but he's no longer the point of contact now. Now we have a new person, and I've been working with Lyle.
Not Christopher Jackson, somebody else?
What's that?
Not Christopher Jackson, somebody else?
No, I'm sorry. Christopher Jackson's still over the homestead, but the Postal Service contact. He's no longer the point of contact for the growth coordination for our district. He's not really, that person, the growth coordinator, is not the final say. They have a supervisor that they receive a request, that they forward this request onto the postal master or the area manager. We actually have a meeting this week with the new area manager. Lyle helped set it up. So I can't say we necessarily have any leverage in this. This is the federal government, but we can at least try to figure out how we can transition to this better. I have spoken with Christopher Jackson with regard to the ADA accessibility issues that has resulted in sidewalks being put into the homestead areas. The issue is those areas were never designed to have centralized locations. If we would have known this beforehand, typically you have like open space areas where you place these boxes and they're made so they're accessible to everybody. Right now, they maybe have to place them big blocks somewhere where it wasn't planned. But again, that's part of the process, and that those approved locations are approved by the Postal Service. But as I noted in the packet, I forwarded regulations, the requirements that developers have to go by and agree to with regard to mode of delivery. This is something I think from top down, the Postal Service is trying to lower the cost. So if they can deliver mail to 20 people in one location, as opposed to one location, then that's what they're doing. That's pretty much all I have.
This is it?
This is it. We'll find out what comes of the meeting this week.
And Rashad, you may not can answer this question. This might be the point, or may be a point that you can have in the discussion with them. I would think that this only should be applicable to developments that are not effectively on the ground. Is that part of the logic?
That's what I was trying to emphasize. Well, I don't know if we can get there now, but
Let me give you an example, and I agree, it's the federal government, and some on this council work for the federal government. I don't know how well they work.
He gets his way every time, that's what he's saying.
It was a holiday today.
The example would be, we didn't approve the Oklahoma tract for Chris Jackson. It just so happened it was the same developer. We didn't approve the Oklahoma tract, and that tract is still, as far as I'm concerned, up in the air as to what may eventually happen with it. But if something ever does happen with it, then I would see where the postal delivery scenario, the one stop, one drop scenario kind of works. But as you pointed out, there are phases of Homestead, there are phases of Stony Creek where this was not taken into account, and they are platted for the most part, platted on the ground. There's some variation that can occur. I just want to be sure that argument is made clear with them, and I'm sure you guys have already thought of it. I just want to bring it up and give my 5 minutes of fame in this meeting.
we'll definitely bring it up again. I brought it up to the previous growth coordinator. Not sure who the new person is yet, but their response was that there's more than 6 lots, it didn't matter.
Because quite frankly, they're creating a hardship on us through the ADA.
Yeah, right.
And we weren't set up for that. Those ones that are on the ground, so to speak, at this point. And so they want us to violate the ADA at the same time. It's just not an easy way to deal with both of those scenarios.
Right.
Rashad, I appreciate you bringing this up and Mayor putting it on the agenda. Looking at the ones at Homestead, and I actually do agree with Councilman Egan that those that are on the ground that weren't designed, we're asking us to put something somewhere where it doesn't fit. And in the case of Homestead, and I know you've seen the pictures because several people complained about them, they actually face the wrong way with no way to access them unless you go through the dirt. So that can't be, in my opinion, a reasonable solution, regardless of the post office. And by the way, working for the federal government, I guarantee there's an appellate process and a variance for every organization there is. So how we get through that, if that's a developer or to the town, I don't have the answer for that, but if we're going to the pod, so to speak, then perhaps we need to set a standard for what that pod is going to look like. Certainly, I don't think what's at Homestead is satisfactory. Not that that's our town's fault, we kind of got caught in the transition, as you stated, but if we can acknowledge to the post office that, hey, we're going to make that transition, but we can't do it here, there's no place to put them, it's compatible for ADA and the other scenarios, maybe we can get to the Homestead, as we get to the Stony Creek, then we develop a standard for which that looks like, that they're covered, that they face the street, or whatever the case may be, they have ramps, they're ADA, they're lit, something that looks better than some metal boxes stuck in the ground. And again, that's not our town's fault, we got stuck in that scenario, so when you meet with them, I would ask that we try to exempt those that are already on the ground, that don't have a place for them, and then we acknowledge that we will go forward building pods, and then that has to be part of the new PDs, I guess, is that we come up with a standard. I don't know who does that, I don't know if it's a PD that we do that, but we come up with a standard for where these pods look.
They have specific boxes that they allow to be used. The ones that are in the Homestead are somewhat the higher end. I don't know if you've seen some other ones that are pretty plain Jane, silver, look like, there's no decoration. These ones actually, in the Homestead, actually have a little pedestal on them. In response to the direction they're facing, I went back and forth with the developer in regards to this, because it didn't make sense to me either. But they're set up for the driver. Whenever he pulls up, that back side opens up completely. It goes mill and closes up. The point of access are for the residents to take the sidewalk, not the right of way. So that one that I noted, that's the only one that I feel like you can't get to because there's no sidewalk. That's the reason why the sidewalks were put in the open space areas. So those are, quote unquote, those are ADA accessible.
So the postman's going to have to get out of the vehicle to get to the back side or the front side, no matter what.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter if it's on the back side, the residents can access it to the front side. Right.
And all there is, and I haven't thoroughly gone through it, but there is an area of maneuverability that they need for ADA accessibility on that pad. So if somebody rolls up in a wheelchair, they need to be able to turn around and roll away. But from the right of way, it's not intended to be ADA accessible from the street. It's from the sidewalk.
So I've got some pictures of some that are being developed up in different developments. I'll send those to you, at least since we're not trying to make a decision here, give you some insight as to what other ones look like. I just don't think that fits what the Sunnyvale residents were expecting, nor actually the town either, as a matter of fact.
I agree. I forwarded those, a different style, to the developer of the Homestead, Christopher Jackson, and showed them that this can be done in a whole bay in an open space area where it's not affecting anyone. Everyone can come and go as they please. Again, we're caught up in the transition,
Right.
but also he had pushback with regard to the way they're oriented. He was told to face them to the street, the back to the street. Hopefully this meeting this week we can resolve some of
This
this.
week, okay.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
I think I just want to make one final comment that as much as I want to negotiate and try to get as much of this as we can, I think the reality is that we are going to continue to see this centralizing need as we move forward. With the rate of population increase, not only in North Texas, but all across the country, with the post office's need to cut costs, just as, everything they laid out in that document that you provided for us. I mean, looking at it from a business perspective, I do exactly the same thing that they're doing. I think really what they need to do is raise their rates more than they need to do anything and take advantage of what UPS and FedEx and all those other guys are doing and try to balance that out. But I think the sad reality of it is that I'm only saying this because those of you who are younger who are involved with this need to be really thinking about what you can do with neighborhoods like the Harris Edition and what are you going to do with the Green Edition and a lot of these older areas that don't have a place to put this centralized delivery because it's going to happen. It's the federal government.
Thank you, Rochelle. Please keep us posted. Additional questions for staff? Okay. Thank you very much again for adding this to the agenda item discussions. Going to item number 8, that's the town engineer portion of the agenda. That is to discuss and consider resolution 18-23 of the town council of the town of Sunnyvale approving a task order with McManus Johnson Incorporated for engineering services for water main conflict analysis and relocation designed for a state highway 352. Slide.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. What this is in regards to is, as I've previously discussed with you, TxDOT is currently working on the design of the State Highway 352 project, which is South Collins Road from 80 down to the Mesquite city limit. The town of Sunnyvale has existing water and sewer lines within that right-of-way, and some of those lines are in conflict with TxDOT's proposed improvements and therefore have to be relocated. Over the last 2 or 3 months, I, in conjunction with Bob Johnson of McManus & Johnson, have been working with TxDOT to, number one, make sure that we have a firm handle on what is out there of the towns, what needs to be moved, what can be left in place. We've been going back and forth with TxDOT, and we've come up with a list of the final items, which was in Bob's proposal. That's part of your packet. And these are the items that TxDOT and us have agreed on, or these are the items that need to be moved. There are other existing town infrastructures, particularly sewer, that are out there that are not going to have to be moved. So as I say, we've done some give and take with TxDOT, and this is sort of the final list. In order to get this done, the most effective way to do it is for the town to create plans to be drawn, again, showing all these lines where they need to be moved. These plans would later on then be included in TxDOT's overall bid package. TxDOT would bid it, TxDOT's contractor will build it. That way the town doesn't have to get it bid and get it built. The idea being to save time and money for the town to get this done. The task order that has been submitted to y'all for this item is for McManus & Johnson to get these plans put together. And then once they've been put together, they're submitted to TxDOT. We put together a joint contract at that time to allow that to go forward as part of the State Highway 352 project.
So, Lyle, one quick question for you. So it's going to cost us $655,000 plus change, right?
Yes, so that's McManus & Johnson's opinion of construction cost at this time for that.
Is that something we anticipated before, or this is something we just... I just worry what else is not, we don't know.
It wasn't anticipated before I was here. Again, before I was here, it just hadn't been looked at. That money will not be due until that project actually goes to construction, which, again, as I've kind of told y'all before, the schedule is probably 2020 is when we're going to have to actually write that check out to TxDOT.
I thought we had an agreement with the TxDOT through which all expenses for the road will be met by TxDOT.
No, sir, that's not the case for the utility relocations. Again, I've gone over all this with.
So that's for road construction, not relocation, okay.
Correct, yes, sir, yes, sir. Yeah, road construction, we're not on the hook for anything for that. This is just for water relocation.
Have you talked to TxDOT about whether this is something which they'll pick up or?
Yes, sir, that discussion has been had with them, and this is what we've got to relocate at our expense, according to them. But that has been discussed with them.
So you're asking for an approval for $54,000, right? No, it's $655 this time.
That is correct, yes, sir. This is just the $54,000 to allow McManus & Johnson to proceed with the plans.
Council, questions for Lai? Okay, no questions? Can I have a motion to approve the resolution 18-24 of the Town Council of the Town of Sunnyvale? I'm sorry, different. Resolution 18-23 of the Town Council of the Town of Sunnyvale approving a task order with McManus Johnson Incorporated for engineering services for water main conflict analysis and relocation design for State Highway 352 for an amount not to exceed $54,000. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. McNeil to approve the resolution. Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by Finch. To approve resolution -18-23 for an amount not to exceed $54,000. Everyone heard the motion? Additional discussions? All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Light. Moving on to item number 9, which is to discuss and consider resolution 18-24 of the town council of the town of Centerville for the sale of a .1675 acre parcel of land at the southwest corner of TC Lefton Boulevard and State Highway 352 to the Texas Department of Transportation for State Highway 352. Mr. Light?
Yes, sir. This particular item regards, as you said, this parcel here at that corner of Lupton and 352. TxDOT has been moving forward with acquiring all the various right-of-way parcels that they need for this project, and we have been approached by them in regards to this one. This is not one of the 3 ones that had previously been deeded over to the town. This is a separate 4th parcel that there had never been any previous arrangement concerning. It's a little small piece of property that was deeded over to the town at some point in the past. It's been functioning as right-of-way of the town. It's far too small for the town to have any other practical use for it. And essentially, TxDOT wants to purchase this property from the town for the amount of, it's in your packet, it's $50-some-odd thousand. And we would essentially transfer right-of-way from the town to TxDOT, which it's along the state highway anyway, so there's really no downside to it that I can see for the town.
So wow, moving forward, when you come to us with a contract, you can always offset it with the sale of something. That'd be great.
Well, I'm sure going to try, sir.
Maybe that's where you got the $54,000 number, maybe.
Worked out well this time, that's for sure.
Yeah, Bob Johnson didn't know anything about this.
Okay, now we are kind of deviating. So, okay, council, questions for staff on item number 9, which is resolution 18-24. If not, can I have a motion with respect to resolution 18-24 as presented?
Motion to approve 1824 as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Fitz to approve 18-24 as presented. There a second?
Second.
Second by Alan. Everyone heard the motion? Additional discussions, all in favor signify. All opposed, motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. So I'm trying to get to my agenda. Okay, moving on to item number 10. Discuss and consider additional funding towards the glacier concept plan development. Would that be Tracy?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Tracy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is on the agenda for the additional funds for moving forward with the David McCaskill Group to put together a master concept plan for the glacier tract. Originally, when I had come before the town, it was to expense 50/50 for up to $10,000, and now the cost is up to $16,000 for the cost of the master plan. So it would be split 50/50, about $8,000 for 4B and $8,000 for council.
Council, question for Tracy. Tracy, I know we talked about this in our workshop, and I'm in favor of it, but so when we, on page number, I do read the package, so page number 168, for the compensation service, there's a bunch of pre-designed services for $12,000. I guess the point was $28,000 as opposed to the $16,000 you're talking about.
So the original draft that they had proposed with the $28,000, that included for being able to put together the leasing, look over the lease agreements, what can be done, how the leasing could be structured, if you could do it with a nonprofit, if the town were to do it. So we took out all those things to just focus on the concept plan itself. So once we did that, then what was left with just the concept plan is the second draft you see, which is up to the $15,000.
Okay, so the plan as presented is what 4B recommends and the Glacier Track Committee agrees with.
Correct, for the for the $15,000 draft. And the reason the additional $1,000 is in there is because there's a potential for up to $900 for reimbursement costs for mileage and stuff,
So you're asking for an approval from the town council for,
up to $8,000.
okay. Do we approve the 4B also?
Yes, sir, 4B has already approved it.
Do we need to approve the 4B?
Less than $10,000, they can bring it.
Okay. Council question for Mr. Anderson.
Tracy, I just want to bring up the point that I made at the night of our workshop, and that is consideration and lot. We may need to get the town engineer to speak with respect to this, and that is, I'm not, the brainstorm that I had the weekend before we had that workshop was that there might be a possibility that some of this property could be utilized to help us with some of the drainage issues that we're having coming out of the M streets, as well as some downstream issues as well. And Lyle, what my thought was, is building a second, although it would be first in the flow of water coming from the M streets, but a second detention pond that would help alleviate maybe some of the problems that are going on in the M streets. But it would also maybe help alleviate some of that that's going on down behind the falls, subsequently over the Trip. And I just want to be sure that when we bought this initially, it was more with the focus of retaining that pond, that look, that appearance, the horses, all that sort of good stuff. I think this is, the thought idea that I had here is not one necessarily of, it's almost like thinking out of the box, sort of way over here to left field. And I just want to be sure that if we do allow this study to go forward, I don't have a problem with the study so much as I want to be sure that we're utilizing this land as best we can. And if there's, I would like to see your involvement or hear your opinion of staff that discussed with that workshop of whether or not what I'm thinking might help us some with respect to that.
I think there's definitely some potential on this property, because I've been kind of thinking along those same lines. As you said, that the M's and all that, the M's and all that drain through that detention pond and then on downstream. One thing I've thought about doing, rather than necessarily building a second pond, is modifying the existing pond. You know, there's a very lackluster, for lack of a better word, outlet structure, and I think we could do some modifications to that structure and make a better use of the existing pond basin to detain water for at least some flow events. So I think there's definitely some potential there, but I also think there's still some potential to move forward with the concept plan study. I
just want to be sure that because these are basically two different arenas that we're kind of working in, and I hate to use the term arena because we're talking about horses, but you know, I want to be sure that the town as a whole is working together, because I think that we can get, you know, I don't think council would have a problem paying 4B back for some portion of the land that would be utilized. But then on the other hand, if we move forward with this study, I think that Tracy's talking about, the consideration of the fact that you may not have as much land available to you for the horses to roam needs to be taken into consideration, the same thing. And I just want to be sure that everybody's kind of working together as we move forward. And you know, that as Tracy and I have talked, it's not only just the horses and the look of that, but it's also being able to get connectivity of the trails that are already planned through there. And I'd like that to be taken into consideration as well.
Absolutely, yes, we can do that.
Tracy, I can agree with Mr. Egan on that. This is something which we have a problem in town. So let me ask you, if council has got to go and approve this this expense, do you think the consultant can still work with the line to get, again, I'm assuming that we can still go with all the horses and the trail. He's talking about expanding the pond. I'm thinking that all of them can work together, not necessarily in conflict with each other. I want to make sure the consultant gets a chance to talk with the line and get his input. Is that possible? Sure.
Lyle has already told me, don't get rid of my detention pond.
Not getting rid of it, maybe even expanding to some extent without still accommodating what
Sure,
for
I was
the
just
other
joking.
measures.
But yes, we can definitely work with.
Because I want to make sure that whoever comes in, talks to our town staff and Lyle and gets started. That's the expert we look up to, right?
Sure.
Council, additional questions for the staff? If not, can I have a motion with respect to the request for additional funding towards the Glacier Track concept plan development? I think the requested amount is not to exceed $8,000. Not everybody at the same time.
Move to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Egan, right. Second by Mr. McNeil to approve the additional funding towards the Glacier Concept Plan development for an amount not to exceed $8,000. Additional discussions. All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Moving on to item number 11. You get there. That is to discuss and consider Collins Road expansion lighting in the town center district. Ms. Anderson?
So the EDC had been talking for some time about the possibility of the Old Town lights on the median to be able to put banners or Christmas decor that's lighted in the medians with the expansion project. In further talking to Encore about the possibility of their lights and what that would entail, if we went with Encore lights, we would not be allowed to put electricity in the poles to be able to allow for lighted Christmas decor or whatever we would want. We could put banners, but there will be some restrictions on that. So in looking at it a little bit further, if we wanted to do that, we would have to go out on our own and purchase our own poles. Don't know exactly what those poles will cost until we look at some of the options, and that's what's presented before you tonight, to kind of look at some options to see what types of lights, and you should have a picture on the dais of a few options that narrows it down from what's in the packet. Being able to look and see what style of light you want. Lyle and I can work forward or move forward in looking at the requirements and regulations, setbacks, lighting, what's needed for safety issues, and be able to put that in the bidding process when he does the Collins expansion in January, and then they would come back with a package deal to find out what the cost of that would be. So what Lyle and I kind of talked about today is kind of just seeing what style of lights y'all would prefer to go with. So that's where the narrowed down one-sheeter ABC options that y'all have before you. So essentially A and B are the same concept. You have a little decor on the top or a little decor on the bottom. The lighting style is a little different on the actual light piece itself. Forgive me, I am not up to par on downtown lighting. I have learned.
Lyle, any thoughts, Lyle? So this is just the optics, right? Just how the downtown should look like. That's just
Correct.
the country look, the small town look. That's what it looks.
Correct.
Not really the functionality.
Correct, and that's what, so once you decide what kind of light or what style light, then we can go back and look at the manufacturer to see what the requirements are. And Lyle would work with me on being able to figure out which exact lighting would be the best for public safety and what we need as far as luminance and the...
So you're looking for an ABC type of approach? Is that what you're
Correct.
looking for?
Yes, sir.
Lyle, any thoughts?
Well, so just to back up what Tracy said, any of these can be made to work on the Collins Road project. Just we need a little input from y'all on which type of one that you prefer, and then we'll make it happen to get it into the project.
Yeah. Council, any preferences?
Can they all have banners? Some of them look like they have poles and some don't, but they all have banners added to them.
Yes, sir.
We can?
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I just want to elaborate a little bit on it. A couple of different things. First of all, where the problem comes in on this is which one gets selected has to do with the photometrics of the lights and how far apart you put the poles and how many poles it's going to take. On the other hand, and the second point to what I'm talking about here is, personally, I don't know what I want or our downtown area to look like from an architectural design perspective. And I don't know if anybody, I mean, maybe some of you guys have that idea of what you want it to look like when it comes to this. We're kind of in a catch-22 situation. Let's pick the light before we know what the photometrics are and know how many poles there are. You know, we may end up, if we pick A as an example, A may require 42 poles, or B may only require 12. Because we don't have the photometric data to know, you know, is the one that we're picking, what do we want this, architecturally, what do we want this to look like? And quite frankly, I think that this is where we need to have somebody who designs these things, because as everyone knows, we're building our downtown central business district area from scratch. There are no existing buildings out there that we're working from. And as a result, we've not been given any renderings or anything that show us what our vision is that I can think of, and I can't think of any renderings. And therefore, it makes it hard for me to select which one of these posts, other than just personal preference, well, I like that one over the other one, because I don't have enough technical data. And quite frankly, Lyle's between a rock and a hard place, because he's got to get this figured out so that he can start telling people, okay, we need light boxes every 12 feet or every 50 feet or wherever it's going to be in the median. I just wanted to bring that up. This is not an easy decision to make, because there's so many different variables that we don't have the answers to.
And we kind of anticipated that a little bit, so it's on for tonight. Now, we can bring it back in December as well to give you a month to kind of look over it, have any questions, have us look into other things further. But it's going to bid in January, so the hope is that we have something within the bidding process in January. Otherwise, we have to take some extra steps to have that. So if we can have that in the bidding package, then that would be ideal.
I like C. Let's keep moving. Anybody else have a different opinion?
I prefer A.
I'm leaving you. Okay, anybody else?
B.
Okay, seriously.
I have no opinion.
Okay, anybody else? You want B? Are you joking or serious?
No, serious.
I like B.
You go to the B?
Or A.
Keep in mind, we already have interior property requirements for lighting. So town hall has a light, multi-use building will have a light, the bank has a light. So there'll be an identity for the area. This will establish the roadway identity. The only thing with regard to C, I mentioned this to Liz, you could possibly put the logo, AutoJet logo, not necessarily color, painted, but just the logo. Yes. In that C version. Now, the lumens.
That's not good?
Yes, you are correct, Mr. Egan, in regards to the lumens that will dictate the spacing.
Because I bet you the photometrics for C are the worst. Because the lights
I
up
would
inside
suspect
the
you're
can.
correct in that too. Yes.
Which means more poles.
Right.
When the worse are the photometrics, the more poles you gotta have.
Yes, you're right.
We gotta pick one just to stay on track, so they can plan the base amounts and everything like that.
The other thing too about the logo would be it's so high, are you gonna really see whether there's a logo up there or not? I was looking at the mesquite one that you see in the
You don't-
packet.
Okay.
Until you,
Take my things.
yes.
Okay, all right, so C is, I guess, fine. I'm back, so A and B, guys, arm wrestle it, figure it out.
Thank you,
See if I
Mayor.
give A or B, can you pick it, or you need to go with it?
Well, right now, there's majority on B, so,
Okay, sounds good. Good, good, I'm good.
thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Oof. Okay, going over to item number 12, that is to discuss and consider first reading of an ordinance 18-27, an ordinance of the town of Sunnyvale, Texas, amending the Code of Ordinance Appendices, Article 8.000, utility-related fees to amend Division 1, water and sewer, adopting new utility rates for water and sewer, including new general service, deposit, tapping, and line extension, implementing a meter size based minimum charge structure for water service, increasing minimum charges and volumetric rates each year from January 1, 2019 through January 1, 2023 at the levels indicated in the rate tables provided within this ordinance. Said rate increases to automatically go into effect on January 1, 2019 and for each subsequent year thereafter through January 1, 2023 unless the town council takes action to revise this ordinance. Authorize the mayor to order the implementation of the amended rate schedule within and without the town, declaring a public purpose, repealing any ordinance in conflict with the ordinance, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. So, Ms. Hopkins?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose and scope of this ordinance has been now twice presented to Council, the last time being at the 6 o'clock meeting tonight. So unless you have any questions, I don't have anything to add.
So the rate table is what is given on page 199?
It should be, yes, the page
And
is
120.
immediately following
And
the ordinance.
200. So the effective date is January 1st or February 1st, 2019?
The effective date is January 1st.
Okay. Council, this is the first reading, so there's no decision will need to be made today. Council, additional questions or discussions on this topic? If you have any thoughts, please be sure to let Ms. Hopkins know. So this is going to be back on the December 10th council agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hopkins. Moving on to item number 13, that's the assistant town manager portion of the agenda. To discuss and consider approving a request for proposal for an evaluation of options related to delivering police services.
Mayor and Council, as you're aware, in the summer of 2017, we were notified by Dallas County that our cost for patrol services was going to increase by 46% over the previous year. This year, we've also experienced another increase of 4% in our contract services for police. And this past summer, the council directed staff to go out for an RFP to look at options for a police study to determine what our options could be moving forward. We released that RFP in September to approximately 8 vendors. We had 1 respond to our request for proposals, and that's Matrix Consulting Group. Their proposal has been provided in your packet tonight. Robert Finn from Matrix Consulting Group is also here and will be giving a brief presentation outlining their proposal. We had 2 firms respond stating that this was a type of study that they don't do. They do more organizational culture type studies for police services. And then we also had some indications from some other vendors located in California and the Northeast, mainly the DC area, that while they do these types of studies, ours wasn't large enough in scope to warrant the travel and the warrant them submitting a bid for this project. I do feel both Charles and I reviewed this proposal, and we both feel that Matrix is both qualified and capable to provide the type of study that we're looking to do. And other than that, if you have any other questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll have Mr. Finn come forward.
Okay, council question for Ms. Black. If not, we have representatives of Matrix here. Robert, good evening, sir. Robert.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Excuse my voice, I feel a little sinus thing going on. So. We appreciate the opportunity to come to you and discuss our proposal to look at the feasibility of the options available to the town to provide police services to the community. I'm a retired police chief from Dallas-Fort Worth area, South Lake specifically. We're a national firm and have considerable experience in both contract services as well as looking at organizations that are currently contracting services, looking to start municipal services. So exploring all those, the feasibility is not something unique to us. As for me, when I was chief in South Lake, we worked with the city of Keller to contract for both dispatch services and jail services, and that has expanded to animal control services, and then Keller and Colleyville and others getting together with some court services. So that regionalized approach for shared services is not unique in terms of your scope of work, something that I have experience with personally, and then the firm overall. As for the project team, I'd be more an advisor and kind of a as-needed day-to-day guy, but you got a real solid police services team that focuses on specifically these types of studies.
So are you based in California now, or are you based in your office?
I am as far away from here as you can get in Trophy Club, Texas. So if you're ever driven 635,
You're going to be a consultant, right?
Correct.
For this one, you won't be the person who's working.
I will not be the prime lead consultant. I'll go through the team later, but I'm available to them. I'm local. It's a 45-minute drive over here from me. Even at rush hour today, those express lanes come in very handy. It was a good improvement. So as for the firm, the leaders of our firm have been providing municipal consulting services since the 80s. They left a larger firm to form Matrix Consulting in 2001, specifically so that firm leadership could be involved in the studies and not spend all their time at corporate meetings. In that time, we've done over 350 law enforcement and over 300 fire studies across the country. We're headquartered in Mountain View, California. However, we've got satellite offices, my offices in Keller, and then we've got offices in Charlotte, North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, Spokane, Washington, and the St. Louis area, as well as a small satellite office in Boston. So we're across the country and have experts that only deal in the consulting of municipal issues. As for police and fire, public safety, dispatch work, it's around 50 to 60% of our work each year. So it's by far our largest business segment. Currently, locally, we're just finishing up a large project for the city of Fort Worth on redesigning the beat deployment and staffing analysis for how they should grow as they continue to move north toward the Alliance Corridor.
Sorry, do you mind if I ask questions now? Or should I?
No.
Okay. I read through your packet, and again, thanks for the detail. A lot of activities out in California and the Northeast. I mean, you did say 50% of the studies is police. Have we done something right? Now here we are trying to evaluate. We love our DSO. People like DSO. We have emotional attachment to DSO because we love the force there, but it's just more of a financial decision than anything else. Right? That's really it. So our scope is good office, right?
Yeah, your scope is, and let me
Is that something similar to what you're doing? That's what I'm asking.
kind of go to the work plan real quick. So when you look at your work plan, this work plan is real similar to a project that we just finished up for a city in the Fort Lauderdale area, Cooper City, Florida. They contract for police and fire services with the Broward County Sheriff. The look was for us to identify potential contract options similar to what you're seeing. The costs were rising for the sheriff to provide services, so they wanted to see are there opportunities for some local partners that would be willing to contract with us to provide services, and then what's the feasibility for us to do the services in-house. As we worked through it, none of their neighboring communities that were viable partners wanted to provide the contract services, so it really became back to what are appropriate services for the sheriff to provide versus what would it look like for you to start your own police and or fire departments in the community. With that, we did project kickoff, analyzed the current services to give them a factual review of the as-is services, gained input from the community on 2 levels. One was a survey. The second was using a community focus group, which Leslie told me is something that was desirous for this. With that, at each point in the study, we would meet with that citizen focus group and talk to them about options, and they would work with us so we could design what good looks like here. So there's a number of things that are going to drive the staffing levels for the police service. workload is one, but beyond the workload is what's the desired level of proactive available time. So they're going to respond to calls for services, but then there's going to be things that the town wants them to work on, quality of life issues. Are they going to be involved in code enforcement of them, traffic citations, noise complaints? So what level of engagement do you want them to have for community things? So getting that input from the town, and that allows us to then develop a staffing formula that'll work. Also getting reasonable pay ranges for like communities in this part of the Metroplex, and then building a 5-year financial plan that not only includes your one-time capital costs, what your startup costs are going to be, and then what the staffing and operating and budgeting costs would be moving forward, so you can make an informed decision. And that would look at status quo. Are there things the sheriff's providing now that maybe you don't need, or you can save money by doing differently? Looking at, we'll just use Mesquite as an example of a potential partner. Are they interested? What would it look like? What performance levels would you expect from that kind of a contract partner in terms of how quickly they need to get to type 1 calls, how many officers have to be assigned to this area if we turn this into a beat, and cost that out. And then breaking that out into saying, okay, what if we have the police officers, but they operate the jail, they operate the dispatch center, we share emergency management, different things that you won't necessarily need on a full-time basis here that would make more sense in a shared services environment. So kind of a hybrid all the way to, okay, we build a police facility, we have our own holding facility before they transfer, and what that would look like. So getting community input on how each one of those scenarios should look, and then really walking through how are operations currently provided, what do you like, where do you see improvement opportunities, what types of changes would you need, and then that lets us get into assumptions on best practices and having a discussion on here's best practices, here's kind of acceptable practices. If you look at a city like yours, you're typically going to have higher proactive rates, especially at night. So from 11 p.m. to 7 in the morning, the welcomettes come in, and there's not a lot going on. So you see higher levels of proactivity, but that's usually when the worst wrecks happen, and you have to have officer safety kept in mind, and then you have to have availability kept in mind. So you'll see officer safety driving that staffing even more so than the calls for service. Whereas in the daytime, you can rely more heavily on calls for service model for what it's going to look like, appropriate spans of control, proper supervision, and then what are the resources going to be? Talking about and discussing, okay, what type of patrol vehicles do you want? Because you can have everything from small 4-door sedans to larger 4-door sedans to the SUV style sedans. Each one of those will have a different price point, so it really depends on that kind of a deployment decision and what you're going to do. And our fleet guy would be involved in costing all that out. Here's the typical return on investment in terms of maintenance cost, lifespan, and this is even though this one costs $50,000, maybe you can get an extra year of it. So, annual costs are better than this choice, which tend to break down more often and not stand up to the wear and tear of the 24-hour police work that you're experiencing. So once we've got the resources, then we look at the operational costs. You're going to have to buy uniforms, protective vests, guns, handcuffs, all this stuff for training, bullets, outfitting the vehicles. So we'll get all those one-time capital as well as ongoing operational costs, and then look at the transition costs between how services are provided today and when they would be provided. Because if you were to decide to stand up on your own, there's going to be a period of time where the sheriff's still going to have to be providing some service as your hiring administration policies are getting developed. They start hiring personnel. If they have to go to the academy, it's going to take longer. And if you're able to attract fully trained folks who can just ride with some of their deputies and learn the town and get trained, and then you're going to have to roll that up. So what are those transition costs going to be when there's going to be some overlapping services and you're not necessarily functionally providing on your own, versus if you went, for example, and just started contracting with Mesquite, it would be a clean break and that contract ends and another one begins when you've got fully trained folks coming over and providing service. And then we do the draft and final report. As with all the other interim deliverables, we recommend not only that citizen focus group, but also a staff steering committee where we send the interim documents, they review them to make sure that they're factual. We make any edits that are needed, revise the report, and then develop and deliver the final project report, and then present our findings and recommendations to you in public meeting. So the schedule looks like it'll be 14 weeks. Depending on, I know we got Thanksgiving coming up, it probably wouldn't kick off before that. People are starting to take holidays. So it really depends, is this a December kickoff to start it before the Christmas holidays, or is it a January kickoff to wait till everybody's back to work and kind of working through the early spring? So we always try to make ourselves available to be able to kick a project off within 2 weeks of the contract signing. So get the contract signed, and then any travel arrangements that are needed. Interviews can be scheduled to make sure people are in town and available, and then we start the one-on-one interviews and really learning about the as-is services, get the data, and then move on through the process, keeping them involved and informed the entire way. So again, we're experienced in this, done several hundred studies. Contract studies are not new to us. Feasibility of forming law enforcement agencies from a startup are not new. With most recently a project that just finished last month in Cooper City, Florida, and we've done probably 15 different ones this year across the country. California seems to be the biggest spot for that kind of discussion right now. There's a lot of sheriffs that provide contract services, and the costs are going up, and different municipalities are looking for other options and how to do it. So California, Florida. It's not, we're working with the Woodlands right now. They're looking at moving from becoming a corporation to incorporating as a municipality, and part of that is the police services. But they've got services from 2 different sheriffs and a constable. They're providing different services. So we're still working through exactly how that would look from a single contract partner to still using multiple partners to start their own municipal police department to serve the Woodlands. So that's our only current similar project in the state of Texas. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has.
I have a couple of them, maybe a few. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the sharing the details. I think, like I said, people like this or here. People like the team, and so if the decision is to depart from that service, at least a group of people will be very unhappy about it. And the concern will be, are we compromising dollars for the safety of the people? The answer is absolutely not, right? Primary focus is the safety of the citizens, right? So I think, at least in my mind, again, I'm going to let the rest of the council talk to their mind. Community citizen focus goes engagement is going to be important. Get them buy into it. So, and you said, Leslie also mentioned that you would include that.
Yeah, so
I mean,
we would recommend
all lines are
probably monthly
great.
meetings with them as interim deliverables get ready.
Right.
And then we discuss the options moving forward for the next time.
And again, typically we ask staff to set the timeline, get it done quick, right? I'm not a police expert, so don't take my opinion for anything. Just 14 weeks seems to be too aggressive for me, too short of a time. Again, you guys done this job a lot more than I've done 0. You've done a lot.
So there's 2 things. The way we always propose our projects is with tight timelines. And the reason for that is it keeps everybody on point. So we like to not have something sitting on somebody's desk where they know they've got 4 weeks to review it. We like to send interim deliverables, have them reviewed, so our timeline would show 1 week to review it, get us back comments, so that there's not that built-in delay where a project becomes stale and all of a sudden the timeline slips. So it requires 2 things. 1, for us to stay on focus and get the work done, and 2, the client to be focused and review interim deliverables and have that engagement throughout the project. The first step is in that project kickoff. we lay out the timeline. Okay, here's that 14-week timeline, and we meet with the city officials and whoever the steering committee is, and then we can point out.
Define the steering committee for me. Is that the citizen?
So there's the citizens focus group, but we would recommend a different internal steering committee also.
That is staff or
That's
council?
could be a couple members of council, could be the assistant city manager, the finance director's always a good person to have on there, so that they can look at the factual information and say, financially, yep, as a finance director, this is right, you didn't get any of the numbers are wrong. Whereas the focus group is going to be more for what level of service do you expect, what types of vehicles, how fast when you dial 911 for a high priority call would you expect someone to get there. So they give us that feedback, and then we can use their feedback to do the staffing.
And Mayor, to speak on the timeline, so with 14 weeks, if you were to start January 1st, that puts you mid-April, roughly, on completion. That would be right about the time you need to start discussing your budget for the upcoming fiscal year, so it gets it in pretty early. Staff has time to research what are the implications of your decision are. We can communicate those to DSO as well to show that we are moving forward in some direction, whatever direction that may be. May help us in negotiating that contract for the following fiscal year as well.
So Leslie, I know other people want to talk. I'll get up to stay in a second. So the overall schedule you and Chief put together for the execution, right? Talk about reviewing the existing service plan options, have a police chief, prepare a budget. Yeah, some of them are internal issues, right? Negotiate agreement with other agencies, establishing critical policies and procedures, officers and support staff. Can our staff do that, all that work internally, or do we need the help of a consultant?
Well, let me back up a little bit. So anything past step 2 in that memo is purely a guess that we are going to go with our own police department.
Yes.
If that is not the outcome of this study, then all those steps don't matter. So I want to be clear, the decision to go with our own police department hasn't been made. Okay?
I don't know. Prepare a budget, right? Negotiate agreement with other agencies. Critical policies and procedures. I think a lot of them will apply to you, whether we know, unless you stay with the DSO.
That's what I mean.
Right.
So,
but if you have 3 options,
right?
it's
So,
done, right? Stay with the DSO, go with other agency, or start our own. I mean, that's just.
so that the reason why I hire a police chief as number 3 is because that would be their primary duties would be to start negotiating those agreements, developing policies, look at hiring staff. So that would be the police chief's main responsibility if that were the direction that we took.
So then that person will take on the rest of it? Is that what you're thinking?
Not all of it, but most of it, yes.
Okay.
And we would show that in a detailed implementation plan for each one of the steps for whatever the final recommendation is and how long we would expect those to take. And again, that would be vetted.
So your recommendation will include which option town should pursue?
It would include our recommendation, a final recommendation for which option we believe is best suited for the town. But you will see the detailed with an audit trail of each one. So option A costs 1.2 million, and here's your level of services you can expect. Option B is 1.3, but you can see you've got enhanced service levels here. Option C is $2 million, and it really doesn't have any service level enhancements. So we really like to be the best in terms of overall service, So and then we walk through the implementation plan for that says, step 1, you should do this. We expect that to take you a month. Step 2 would be this, and develop that timeline for you, as well as the proposed 5-year budget for that option once you get up and running.
Council, questions for Robert?
Just a few comments about our citizen involvement, because obviously this is a huge impact. Thank you again for the presentation. Appreciate you trekking over here to do it.
Thank you.
Obviously, as the mayor said, it's a big, it would be a big change for us, but one we're kind of being forced into, right? And so to try to make decisions. So my question relates to your citizen involvement. It seems like we have 2 phases of this kind of contract. We have literally what you're hired to do is explore our options, understand from our staff and from our residents really what we desire as far as service levels. Most of them on these service level, they wanted somebody to show up and be proactive, right? So that's going to be the base level of understanding. So we understand from our citizens. So that's a smaller timeline through interviews and things like that with select citizens, seems to me, than the end, which we talk about when we finally we have the recommendation. Because that's the point, it seems to me like, that we need real citizen involvement to say, look, here's the study, here's what they're recommending. Now we have to decide really what to do. Do we want to stay with our current services, or do we want to go with the recommendation from the group? And that seems to me like where we would engage citizens a little bit more. And I welcome your feedback on this. You've done this, but in my thought, once we get to that point, we could do some more focused talks with our citizens, kind of like what the school did with the bond when they started rolling out, hey, here's the idea. We meet with our HOAs, we meet with concerned citizens, tell them here's what we have, here's the information. Because the worst thing we can do is make a decision without informing our residents of why we're at this point, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm curious from your all that back around to your perspective on the level of citizen involvement in this amount of change, and when is it appropriate, how much is appropriate?
So the first citizen involvement, you've got the focus group. We'll identify those folks, invite them to an early meeting right with the project kickoff. So we'd be engaging them, explaining to them the study, what the purposes is, getting their feedback on all the various options in the study area, and then what's important to them from a citizens group. They would be with us throughout the study, giving us more input, more ideas. I'll give you an example in Cooper City. In South Florida, it's customary and it's considered, one of the recruiting tools to buy a car for every officer. So they all have their personal take-home car. Well, that looks a lot different than most of the agencies here, where you've got a set fleet and, there's daytime cars, nighttime cars, but cars, you just get enough for there to be some appropriate downtime. And some reserve vehicles so that when one's out for maintenance, there's a car available for somebody else to drive. But you never know if that's, we want to stick with that car for everybody. And we want SUVs and we want them to be nice. And so every time you do that, you're checking the dollar box. Okay, this model's getting a little more expensive than what we thought it might look like initially. So that's the importance of that group. The second phase to that early input would be right after kickoff would be us developing a citizen survey. And again, that's where the project steering committee could review those questions. The citizens focus group could review them also and say, I'd really like to see a question like this. So what's the satisfaction with the current level of services? That gives you a kind of a way to weight that. What's your openness to the town exploring other ways to provide services? How safe do you feel walking alone at night? So you can get a gauge for the different things. So basically, what are the important things in law enforcement services to you? And it gives you the opportunity for all citizens to provide input through an online anonymous survey. We usually work with the town to break it up into areas that you've identified as unique areas. So if you've got a really large neighborhood that's very politically active.
We haven't told you we're all unique yet. I'm sorry.
Remember, I was in South Lake, so I fully understand unique.
We are unique, yeah.
So if there's a large, very politically active subdivision, maybe that's, I best identify with living in this part of the town, the farmlands, or the horse country, or this neighborhood. So however you want to break it out, so that way you understand, this is real important on the north side of town, but it's not important to the south side of town where the big population centers are. So just going through that and making sure that everyone in the town has an opportunity to provide input. They can go to the local library and take the online survey. They can take it from home. They can take it from work. So whenever they have time to take it, we usually try to keep them short so they're 15 minutes or less so that people are involved. And that informs the entire town up front. Here's what we're doing. Here's the purpose for it. We're looking to get it complete, by this time. And this is your opportunity for input. The survey will close, at X date and time. And then we come back to that steering committee in the town with those findings. These are your key themes. These things are very important. So we got to make sure in whatever direction we go, you're able to address these needs. crime prevention through environmental design today is not high up on their radar because there's not a lot of retail and business community. So that didn't score something important with them. So your crime prevention type work seems like it can be programmed to be a little bit later in the process.
How many do you normally see on the focus group? What's your recommended number that you?
Typically, it's less than 10. 7 seems to be the normal number,
Okay.
about 7 folks.
We may have a few more than that, but
It happens. Cooper City had 9.
So what's the makeup? Do you recommend including HOAs, representatives, business community, council? What is the makeup?
We always recommend someone from the business community and then a key voice from the citizen community. And then it usually goes into the towns or cities look for people with certain backgrounds. So in Cooper City, they had a resident that was strong in municipal HR. So they brought that person in to kind of what's going on in HR trends in South Florida. How hard is it to recruit police officers? How hard is it to recruit firefighters? So we can get that input. They brought in a retired police chief from a surrounding area to kind of give his input on municipal services and what they'd look like. Because, when we would say, we recommend this, we'd have the discussion, they'd all, look to that police chief expert and say, is that normal? And one interesting thing there was, we recommended a car and a radio and a handheld. And he said, well, most South Florida agencies are going away with that. They just have a handheld. And, for safety, we always like the idea of 2. They got a car and the radio. When they're out of the car, they've got their portable, but if the battery goes dead or something, there's a way to still communicate. So, but it's that kind of input where then the decision is made at that committee level. Yes, we're going to err on the side of caution and go with the 2 radio system, or no, just price it out with the handheld radio, and we're going to save that $2,000 per car.
What's the number that you have normally on the citizen work group?
It's usually 7, around 7, but it goes up or down. Less than 10 is normal. If you get to 12 or more, it kind of gets unmanageable because then you have too many opinions in the room, and whoever's the loudest person usually dominates the meeting, so it's hard to keep it in check.
it seems like you're getting in the weeds on a lot of stuff that normal citizens wouldn't know. Is that normal? I mean, because radios and things like that.
Well, that was only because they had a former police chief on there that said, "Oh, we price
I
it
just
this
worry
way."
about us getting that far in the weeds on those kind of.
Normally we wouldn't, but the makeup of their board was such that they were able to go that low into the line item.
Yeah. Even then, I'm worried about it because you're going to get bogged down.
Yeah, we're pretty good at keeping them on point. So we come in with an agenda, it's got a PowerPoint, we talk through all the issues, and we try to keep those meetings timely.
You have somebody here from your group to kind of lead that, or
Right.
somebody your lead consultant would come in and lead that along with town staff, directing that.
Yeah, typically the town manager and the finance director are in there, because when they, especially when we get toward the final costing, and there's $4 million in startup costs, the question comes to the finance director whether or not we've got that kind of money tucked away. So,
I know you have a timeline. How many meetings would you have with the citizens work group typically?
I would think it'd be 3 to 4 in this study.
So let me ask you, I'm going to kind of go back to what Mayor George was asking initially. You've identified in the contract XYZ 14 weeks. This is what we're going to put together, and there's a sum total. How does that sum total and/or what you specified in the contract parallel with the 9 items that are, I believe, were probably the items you were tasked with in terms of this is what the RFQ is? Am I right, Leslie? 1, conducting a strategic assessment. 2, review the existing service plan, develop options, and a timeline on it. And then everything from there was TBD, which is the hire a police chief, prepare a budget, negotiate agreements with other agencies. Where does what you're going to do with the contract that you've described stop within these 9 items?
So that stops at the draft report. So one thing that we always make ourselves available as a firm, any issue related to implementing a recommendation. So if we recommend X and staff gets to a point where do you know how to do this? Have you been through this before? those types of things, we stay on, we're your partner. Look, we've seen this done 19 different ways, here's best practices, here's how we recommend you go into it. That's usually telephone call consulting, and we help them through it. I've had clients call 2 and 3 years after a study was finished and say, so we're at the point now where you had a recommendation to periodically review the staffing numbers, and we're confused about how to use this program you left us with for evaluating staffing levels. So pull it up, okay, let's talk through what each one of these cells mean. You're going to need your vacation leave numbers, you need your sick time numbers, plug that in. You got to say how much time they're spending in court, and then what's your current turnover rate? Is it 5%? Is it jumped to 10%? Make sure you get that in there, and that's going to give you that number. And then here's how that rolls into the next one of when you should staff those people based on workload.
So Leslie, let me ask you a question, or you were fixing to say something.
Are you asking where this study falls in those 9 steps outlined in my memo and where it stops?
Yeah,
So
I
it's
mean,
between 2 and 3. Depending on what recommendation comes out of this study, steps 3 through 9 could be
Or
thrown
that's
out the
what-
window.
that's
Those were just my best guess of major
what would
tasks
happen, yeah.
if it followed what I think it's going to follow.
Yeah.
It's just
And I appreciate that. I mean, it's kind of laying out a game plan, and I totally understand trying to get it fitted to fit within the window of time that we've got backed up against budget. So I agree with that. I just want to be sure that you're going to use the amount of money we're going to spend to get this documentation is what's going to be the roadmap, assuming we all agree at the end of that.
So
it's going to be the roadmap for implementation.
So whatever recommendation is adopted out of this study should give us a 5-year roadmap. Budget, operations, staffing, all of those things for the next 5 years.
With pretty much the knowledge that we're not just going to turn the switch off on December 31st of some year with Dallas County and turn the switch on the next day and we're going to have the town of Newville.
Right. As he noted in one of his slides, was that transition would be an important part of that, a 5-year budget plan.
And that's part of your
capital
decision
outlay.
making, is if we go this direction, there's $1 million in overlap time.
Right.
And does that make more sense than something that's going to cost us X, which is less than the sheriff, but provides the same level of services, and we can flip the switch. And then there's the hybrid option where the shared services. So we're going to have partner X provide these different services, and we're just going to focus on doing patrol and detective work, or just patrol, but we'll let them be our investigators because we don't anticipate there being that many high-level crimes that require detectives, so we probably won't need a full-time detective. So, but we'll look at all that workload from the sheriff and get all that data so that we can see if where there's a need for full-time equivalents and where contracting part-time folks make more sense.
Leslie, with regard to the contract amount identified here, probably more through Charles's experience than yours, but you may have had some discussions because you were part of those discussions with Charles. Is this a dollar figure that we didn't have any idea about, or this falls into a range of some idea of what we would have?
So when we were initially doing the budget, I just guessed. I couldn't tell you.
That was
but
that $30,000
yes,
number that the
yeah.
guys down here like to talk about?
Right, yeah, that we just throw in. No. But doing some research on finding firms to do this type of study, I looked at some other proposals, and it's well within the acceptable range for this type
And I
of
only
study.
ask that question because, you like to have multiple shots at people coming in and giving us an idea. It sounds like we've tried to get multiple people, and the number I'm seeing here is not ungodly. I mean, I think it's probably realistic for the amount of effort that goes into it, especially if you do it 14 weeks over the holidays.
And the other opportunity is if the assistant sound manager looks at, we broke it out by task, by hours, by dollar amount, and there's always the opportunity to say, can these tasks be combined? Can this be done? It's one pay grade above mine that negotiates contracts, but he's always willing to do it.
And Councilmember Eden.
One last question,
Oh.
and of the other more recent studies that you've done, I would pick Florida, the one in Coopersville. Or
Cooper City.
Cooper City. Isn't that where the shootings were last year?
That was Parkland. It was the town immediately adjacent to that.
That's what
so
I was
it was the
thinking.
same area.
In fact, I met one of the sheriffs who was nearby at that school. Oddly enough, I met her at Napa.
Oh.
back in February. We had some long discussions.
Fortunately, not Napa, that's covered in smoke.
Well, Napa's covered in smoke now, yeah, well, so is all of California. Hopefully it falls off in the ocean, that'll put the fire out. But, now I've already forgotten what of the more recent studies that you've done, is the 14-week game plan a typical 14-week game plan?
Typically, we kind of push this one back 2 weeks from normal, so 16 is what we see normal in this type of study. But the RFP had some timelines we were trying to meet, and we just throw more muscle at it to move the process forward.
And Mark, one more point about the cost of the contract. So several years ago, the council received a proposal to do a similar study, and I believe even at that time, several years ago, it was pretty close to this cost, maybe even slightly higher.
I remember, yeah, that,
So.
yeah.
Council, initial questions for Robert? Or comments?
Thank you. Look forward to the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, Robert. So, Leslie, I understand the time, right? So I'm one of those guys who like always get things to move fast, right? Now I'm kind of, including the 3 or 4 citizens committee meeting and the survey, and he said everything, I like what he said, right? So, we got still 14 weeks, it's realistic, but we got to, council has to discuss either tonight or some other time, how do we pick the citizens committee? That's a few more steps. I'm just trying to understand. I want to hear the council's opinion also here.
Okay, so let me make a recommendation. So I have 3 things that I need you to decide tonight. 1, do you want to continue with Matrix Consulting Group? Do you want to approve the proposal as presented? 2, what does your citizen involvement look like? Do you want to do a focus group? And if so, how do you want me to solicit volunteers, or how are you going to make those appointments? So those are the 3 things that we need decided. If you
So
want,
what's the third one? I'm sorry, I heard the second one.
how do you want me to solicit the involvement for that citizens focus group?
And what's the second one?
Do you want a citizens focus group
Gotcha.
to meet? So if you want to move forward with Matrix, I don't think there's any harm in shooting for that 14-week time frame, and go in with that expectation. If it gets bumped to 16, it gets bumped to 16. But
Is that a cost impact?
No, it's a fixed contract price.
Okay.
So staff's recommendation would be that you move forward with Matrix. You do a citizen committee of no more than 7. That we solicit volunteers between now and the December meeting. You make appointments in December, and this committee gets started in January.
Also, we haven't heard what the cost is.
I'm sorry?
$65,000 is the proposed cost.
Yeah, I don't. So I like soliciting in citizens committee, but I like to suggest, and it's my thought. I know Ryan has some experience, not just my thought, not nominating anybody. Ryan has some experience in safety-related activities in his work. So I just personally, I think I like to Ryan, if that's okay with you, Ryan, okay with the councils, to be part of the citizens committee, because I just don't want to be alluding to you that we got to somehow, instead of opening up, should council look into blocks of people, like Robert mentioned, right? Business development, business folk. Should we, how do we make sure that we get the right representation? That's what I'm asking. In other words, if 7 citizens want, do we appoint them, or do we got to get, be a little more logic behind it, that way we don't exclude any key stakeholders. Ryan, what do you think? If you have some experience in this one.
You asked Ryan, but I would offer this insight, that I'm not sure that we need to make that decision yet as to who that group's going to look like.
Right.
Because we didn't mention the school, some other key things. I think Ryan's got obviously a good handle on what we need there.
Right.
But I'm also not sure the 7's the right number. Just writing down the numbers of the names that Robert indicated, maybe 1 or 2 other groups. So I think to lock into 7, even though I agree, a work group of 10 or 12 would get mayhem.
Okay.
But
So do you want to make it as an action item for a different agenda item and come back? Is that what you're thinking?
yeah, what do you think, Brian?
think times, if we wanna, I think we need to back up to Mark's point on the budget as to how we back this thing up. So if we start January 1, that's 14 weeks in, it's to April, and we have to start looking at budget. But I guess my question is, realistically, are we gonna have a budget decision to make with this study? Because we're talking about a 3 or 4 year plan based on what I heard. And so is it imperative that we have to have a budget, have to have something for the budget in April? Or when we start those budget discussions? Because I'm not sure that there'll be anything next year discussed for 20, or maybe there is, I don't know.
I don't know.
The budget discussion comes in September, right? So if you back.
The budget adoption comes in September.
Yeah, gotcha.
So we have plenty of time.
When is the workshop again? When we did the workshop this
June.
year?
We'll start in June.
Okay.
So I think we have plenty of time to say, as much as it pains me to say this, to slow a little bit and, yeah, as much as that pains me.
I was the one excited to start this year.
So, to start, maybe look at January to discuss it next council session about how we appoint and what we do with it.
What's the makeup of it?
What's the makeup, and then look at appointing in January. I don't have to include in the contract, by the way, it's just a matter of when we start, right? And so, that's fine, but I think when we start, we really need to discuss that.
What do you think, Mark, Chris? I'm sorry, Liz?
Just keep in mind that when you talk about budget on these types of projects, there's very little in this that we can capitalize, maybe the vehicles, and things like that. So when you do get to that point where you want to start that transition, there's going to be a lot of upfront costs. And just like you would be looking at planning for anything else, this may be something you need to start putting back, as we go along. It's just a recommendation, because you can't borrow the money to start your own police department. You could do it to build a jail, but you really can't do it for, for personnel and those kinds of things.
But it does play into our reserve that we have,
I was just gonna say,
the monies that we haven't assigned yet that are in our,
we've got some reserves right now that we could use.
keep that in mind instead of, think about how that's the way I think about it, at least, because we do have some dollars there.
So even if we don't have a budget decision next year, that will impact your budget decisions on other things, most likely.
Robert, I had a question for you. Have you seen any of the towns our size apply for and receive grants for these types of things? Grant money, federally grant money that might be available for it?
Yes, so the grant cycle seems to change every year. It depends on what the makeup of federal government looks like at the time, and then those grant fund shifts. So we did see a lot of that type of money available during Clinton. It reduced during Obama, and we really haven't seen much of a change in what's available in grant money with this administration yet, but it seems like most of those federal dollars are going for border protection and those types of things than they are toward local law enforcement. But again, that changes. You just got to keep your finger on the pulse and see what's out there. The most successful projects, when you see them, are when you're doing some sort of a regional approach. So when you're applying for the grant monies and they see that it's impacting more than just one area, and it's got a little bit of reach. So anytime you can look at regionalization, that seems to get good grant play. And we're seeing that now is in the 911, the dispatch, and that type of regionalization, because they're trying to move everybody toward that P22 compliance and get them out of the band where they're trying to be able to improve the cell service in the areas and take over the band currently used by most municipalities and public safety personnel. So,
I like the idea of waiting for at least a month, because we got 2 of the 7 council members are not here today. I know they have equally passionate about it. Mark, what do you think, Ms. Regan? We talked about bringing it back next week or next council meeting. Mr. McNeil, any thoughts?
Mayor, my only concern is, I'm sorry, Chris, but
Go ahead.
my only concern is and I don't know if there's a lot we can do about it, but we wait till next week to decide what the composition of the focus group's going to be, and then we're 3 or 4 weeks before we can meet again to say, okay, these are the people, and it's February before we're able to get started. Now, it may be because of Liz's comment and the way this is not going to just be turn off the switch one day and turn on the switch the next day. That this is going to be a gradual move, and the timeline may not be as critical, again, about what we talked about backing up against the budget at the same time.
Mr. Nick?
I think this is going to be a long process.
You want to get the mic? Yes. Thank you.
This is going to be a long process, one way or the other. I mean, this is a 14-week process just to get, you know, to a little bit after stage 2 of what's potentially a 9-step plan. So, you know, I don't want to delay things, but I think it's important to take our time and make sure we've got it off to the right footing for the best start. I think that's going to serve the town best.
Additional thoughts on this one?
I think we can go ahead and approve the
I think so.
contract and just delay, and discuss.
So let's take that step at a time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
And yes, to the citizens group.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the selection will be.
Well, maybe Robert can give us an idea of what the typical resume would possibly look like of individuals that, not all the positions, but maybe some key people that we may know that he doesn't know, because we probably know more of the citizens than he does. But maybe we kind of look at it from that perspective. I don't know how we're going to direct Leslie to go find who these people are. That's the next problem I'm seeing.
Yeah, and typically what we see, and for us, the start date, you know,
Can vary.
it's whenever we have a contract and the assistant city manager says, okay, we're ready to start. So for us, it's more of a planning tool of, okay, we know we're starting here, and let's line up all the resources so that we can finish here. Step 1, again, would be sitting down with her and going over the calendar of events as we see it, and if it's, oh, don't pick this, we can't get anything done here because this is our town's anniversary, and all hands will be on deck focused on that, so we've got to slip to 15 weeks because that week's off the table for us to review anything. Whatever it is, we work through that, finalize the schedule, finalize the task plan, and then go through it. But I can look back at our last 5 projects and look at what those steering committees were and what type of folks were on them. It's always the community that selects that steering committee. One thing that we've seen successful is for them to put it up on their website seeking applications for a citizens advisory group to help shape the future of police services in the town. And then, much like you do with your other open boards and commissions, they just have a little quick interest card that lists what their background is so that you can see, okay, we don't want 15 attorneys, and we've got 10 of those. So. It's just saying.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. That answer the question?
Just so happens this council is made up of 15%.
We're underrepresented.
Okay, so I think Leslie asked for 3 decisions. Number 1, she said, can we approve, let me take the readings here a second. Sorry, I moved my chart.
Can you approve a contract with Matrix Consulting Group to conduct an evaluation of options related to delivering police services?
For an amount not to exceed 64,000.
Yes.
Okay. So let's make that motion, right? Can I have a motion with respect to approving a request for a proposal for evaluation of options related to delivering police services with the Matrix Consulting Group for an amount not to exceed $64,000.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
We have a second. Motion made by Finn, second by Mr. Allen to approve appointing Matrix Consulting Group to conduct an evaluation of police services options for an amount not to exceed $64,000. Everyone heard the motion? All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 5-0. I don't know if we need to make a motion or not. I think what we heard is council wants a citizen focus group. I think we want made up of business people, school, maybe HOAs, at least a council member, in my opinion. You want Leslie to go put out a request? Or do you want council to approve? What?
I think you can put a request, but ultimately we need to make sure the matrix.
The made-up of this, make this right.
Yes, that's right. So I don't think it'd be a problem to throw something on the website and say if they're interested, let us know by whatever date,
Okay.
and then we can go from there.
Okay.
So that's how much time you need. You want the answer by December? 1 month time.
Well, my preference would be that you would make the appointments at the December, or
So
that
have
it would be before you by the December council
The
meeting.
deadline in a couple of weeks, and that way we're good.
3 weeks out.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 weeks to get them in.
And if you need to put it on social media, what's the, all of them to get the news out, let's do it. Get the news out. Okay.
And I would ask that council, if you have anybody in particular you're interested in, send them the link or
Yes.
let them know.
Okay.
So-
Very good, Mark? Okay. Everybody else? I'm sorry.
If there's anybody in particular that you want to see serve
think
on the
is
committee,
qualified
make
people.
sure that they submit an application.
Okay, I think that's the last time.
Mayor, I want
Yes, sir.
to
Yes,
make
sir.
a comment
Yes.
with respect to this for those who don't have the opportunity to have spent the time under this roof that several others of us have had. And I know there's people in the town that are going like, what are they going down this road again for? You know, for having lived here as long as I've lived here, I've always liked the fact that the sheriff protects me, not the policeman. It's just that simple. It's more rural, it's more country, it's more of what we try to be in Sunnyvale. But at the same time, I'm realistic. Dallas County and DSO, particularly Dallas County, not the specifics of DSO, the young man that's sitting back there in the back that I really love the fact that he's with us. Dallas County is sticking it to us. And if you haven't walked through some of these budget meetings that we've been in, they just hit us with a $750,000 bill last year. And they kind of feel like it's free gratis to be able to keep doing it. And again, as a businessman, at some point, you look at when it's time to cut your losses. And while I would hate not being able to say the sheriff is who protects me anymore, I also have to realize that we got to watch where we spend our money. And I think we've reached the point, and Dallas County has been telling us for years to change. And it's just important for those who don't keep up or have not been able to keep up with what goes on. It's just important to know that as much as I may like to still have DSO watching over us, financially it's not justifiable to our pocketbooks, and particularly those of us who are getting into the retirement years and may not be able to afford those costs in the future. Hopefully I'm not one of those, but you never know what might happen. Anyway, I just want to make that point clear, particularly to those who are watching us on the streaming thing, that there's members up here, I feel like there's council members up here who would hate to see us lose DSO as an entity, as to lose the sheriff's department as being our protectors. But when you get hit with $1 million bills, and it came at such an untimely time that they did it, that I actually talked to our state representative about changing the way that public entities can contract with other public entities and change the value of the contract during the budget cycle. It's ridiculous. I don't know if that bill's going to go anywhere, because it just so happened the people that I talked to are no longer in the state legislature. But that's my bad choice of people up there. But anyway, I just wanted to make those points that I love DSO. I love the fact that they've been here for the almost 40 years that I've lived here. But I also realize that at some point, we're not going to be able to, and I realized it 40 years ago when I moved here, about how long is that going to stay with us. The fire chief has given us information as to issues concerning response to emergency calls. You get a 911 call come in for somebody who has got a problem, a medical problem, and it can be as much as 20 minutes before we even roll out the door. That ain't right. And I can think of one time in particular where it was to save me, and it was Mesquite who ended up coming and getting it. So we need to do what's right for the health, safety, and welfare of our citizenry, which is what I feel like our number one task is.
Thank you, Mr. Eakin. Anything else?
Sergeant, would you allow us to speak? So I'd like to say just a couple of things. I think it'll be helpful.
Come on.
I'm not being mean, I will be nice.
This is the only comment I'll take. I'm going to say that.
Okay.
No, it's a her this time.
I
That's
just
the only
want
comment I'm going to take.
Debbie Gass, 112 Southview, Southern Texas, 75182. I just wanted to remind some of y'all, and I know you remember, that when we had the 190 committee, they left each committee person chose one person. And it made a very diversified committee and a lot of input for all over different sections of town. I'm not saying you should do that, I'm just saying make a suggestion. It seemed to work very well.
Yeah, I thought about the same thing. Thank you, Mr. Guy. Okay, moving on to item number 14, that's the mayor and council request for future staff updates and agenda items. Does anyone have anything they like updates or items for future council agenda? Okay, I think I'm going to close that one. Council, we have an executive session, and this time council will adjourn into executive session pursuant to chapter 551, subchapter D of the Texas Government Code section 551-074 personal matters. We have an executive session at 9:30 p.m. Thank you. I do anticipate a motion and action out of this executive session. If anyone would like to stay.
Have yourself some
Sorry.
It's that Friday,
It's in the article, you're not you. It's amazing, right?
So I'll send you some of those. I'll reach out.
Where's
to Rick
David?
and say, hey,
No.
can you give me
Do y'all want David in
how
there
the
with me?
Woodlands did it? I've got how Cooper City did it. How they did it down in Riverside, California.
I needed some cookies after that.
Different group, and I gotta say, here's typical makeups.
Charles. Is it really? He asked us that.
Start, so block that time off.
I love it.
All right, thanks. Have a good night.
I'm glad you knew that.
So we come into the regular town council session for 12, and our time is 9:56. Let me confirm that as a result of the executive session, no action will be necessary. At this time, I'm going to adjourn the regular town council meeting for November 12th. Time is 9:57. Good night.